Welcome to a very special episode of the Life of Elvis podcast. I'm your host, Elvis, dressed up as Eric Draven because it was Halloween. And today with me is one of my favorite human beings, Reiki healer and personal trainer, D'Lena Ochoa. So finally, after... Welcome. I invited you to come on the podcast I think yesterday. It was 9 months ago. So we finally made it.
Finally full circle.
Yep. If you haven't seen episode 9, where D'Lena was for the first time on the podcast together with my good friend Alison, make sure you check it out. It was a really good episode. So, got a few announcements because, like I say, it's a very special episode, not just because of Halloween, obviously, but also because it was exactly 1 year since I started this podcast. So this is episode 20, but technically it's, I think, 23, because every episode that Marnie did, there was 2-part episodes. So it's not 2, it's 4, and there was episode 0. So yeah. So I think this is gonna be a start of the season number 3 as well. To refer, I just go by a feeling, with these seasons of the podcast. So it feels like something new is about to start. So let's start a new season. And the fact that we reached 1 year, that's great. And now, another thing that I wanted to announce, D'Lena is going to be my co-host occasionally on some podcasts. Looking forward to it.
Me too.
That's good. So yeah, that's going to be fun. And another thing is, on my birthday, which is only a few days ago, I've put all episodes of my podcast from the very first one up until the most recent one on Spotify and Anchor. So now you can find it on, obviously, my YouTube channel, my Rumble channel, because you don't want to support censorship, and we don't want this podcast to be deleted at any point. Then it's on Spotify now and Anchor, so you can find it all there. All links below as always. And so far as I can remember, the last thing I wanted to say and announce on this podcast, if you're a fan of good music, you can check out my other YouTube channel, which is Elvis Art and Music. Just recently I dropped my first original song. It's called A Reason to Stay. I made a nice visualizer, very trippy. Make sure you check it out. If in doubt, always go to lifeofelvis.com. You'll find everything from the podcasts, all the links for it, for all the platforms that it's on, also all my music and everything else I do, my book, everything's there. So make sure you check it out. I really appreciate it. And yeah, that's about it for the announcement, as far as I can remember. So let's have some fun. Talk some interesting stuff, as we always do.
Always.
Yeah. Right. So let's start with that ghost story you told me about. That was pretty freaking crazy when you told me about it.
You want to get into the juicy stuff right away, huh? All right.
Yeah, why not? Spooky season,
okay. So why not? Should get a flashlight. Huh? It's too bad it's not dark here. I could totally just be like... Okay. So, let me preface this by saying that up until this experience, I don't think I had ever really thought that ghosts were real. I thought they were just something we see in movies and, this made up thing that it doesn't really exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, until one day, my mind was completely changed when I saw a spirit for myself. So this is kind of how it happened, right? I was in Ohio, and I was on a vacation with one of my boyfriends at the time and his family. And we were staying in a 2-story house, and it was one of those houses, okay, that have those creaky wooden stairs that when you walk up and down, you hear the floorboards, you hear all that. So anyways, we were staying on the second floor in the very first bedroom, and there were bunk beds, so I was sleeping in the bottom bunk with my ex's sister. He was on the top bunk, and it was the middle of the night, okay, so it was just probably like 2 a.m., around 2 a.m., and I just happened to randomly wake up, and I was facing the edge of the bed, so I was facing kind of towards a closet, and there was the closet this way, and then at the foot of the bed was the doorway to enter and exit the room. So I was facing the closet, and my eyes opened up, I rolled over, and as I rolled over, I looked to the doorway. And when I looked at the doorway, I saw a woman, like an older woman, standing there. And I thought that it was my ex's grandma because it looked like her silhouette. So I was like, oh, it's his grandma. I wonder what she's doing here. I wonder why she's just standing there. Well, then I started to kind of wake up a little bit more and realized, oh shit, that's not moving. So I was like, oh my gosh, it's a ghost. So I freaked out. I got scared, pulled the blanket up over my head. It was like, no, I'm not seeing this. Definitely not seeing this. But I got so scared, and my mom had always told me, I grew up Catholic, and so my mom always taught me, like, whenever you're scared, say the Our Father, and God will protect you. So in that moment, I said the Our Father in my head, and it calmed me down enough to where I was like, okay again. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna check if it's still there. So I peeked my head back out of the blanket, still standing there. So I freaked out again, put the blanket back over my head again, started freaking out again, and said the Our Father again, because I was scared. And this time I whispered it. Instead of just saying it in my head, I actually whispered it. And when I said amen, I heard whoosh. Like literally that noise, whoosh, of something being taken away by wind. I pulled the blanket back down over my head, looked, she was gone. So me being scared, I crawled up with my boyfriend and was like, I just saw a ghost, you need to wake up, I'm scared, blah, blah, blah. Laid down with him, and he kind of didn't believe it, you know, he was kind of like afraid because I was telling him, and like he trusts me, but at the same time, it's something that he hadn't ever experienced himself either, so he didn't fully, I don't think, believed it, like thought maybe I was seeing stuff, right? So I'm laying there in bed, having a hard time going back to sleep, of course.
Can't imagine.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like laying there trying to go back to sleep, but I couldn't. I was just like shaking, like my body was just shaking. And so I started to just listen. And as I'm laying there listening, I hear the stairs, the creaky wooden stairs, like somebody is walking up and down the stairs. So then I kind of got intrigued. Because again, I had never experienced this, and so to hear it was like, wow, it was kind of really eye-opening for me and mind-opening. So I started listening, and then in the room itself, there was also this spot where if you step over that one spot, it also creaks. So I'm sitting there listening. I hear this being come up the stairs, come into the room, walk over that creaky spot, and go to the bed. Then I hear talking, but not talking like us talking. It was more so radio waves, like frequencies, like, I don't even know how to explain it. But it's
No,
a
no words.
noise. Sorry?
No words.
No, it wasn't any words. It was just a frequency. So like if you think about kind of an old radio where you're trying to find a station, right? And you're turning the dial and it makes those noises as you're trying to find, the clear station. That's kind of what it sounded like. The in between. So the static,
The noise.
the noise, yeah. And that's what it was, but there was two of them, and they were communicating back and forth because one was at the bed, like one of them the sound was coming from the bed, but the other one was kind of by the doorway. And so they were communicating to each other back and forth. And so I'm sitting there and I'm amazed at what I'm hearing, kind of blown away at what I'm hearing, and not really sure if I'm hearing correctly. Even like it was just, what the heck. So so after that, like, they kind of had their conversation and then walked back out the room. So they walked back over that creaky wooden spot on the floor and then walked back down the stairs. After that, I was kind of able to go back to sleep for a little bit. But then I woke up probably around 6 a.m., 6 a.m., when the sun's barely starting to come up and the light's starting to come in through the windows. I open my eyes and I'm facing towards the edge of the bed. My boyfriend's head was right in front of me and he's facing the edge of the bed. So I open my eyes and all I see is my boyfriend's head, and around his head I see her figure standing there at the edge of the bed, right at the edge of the bed. And her hair, I can see her hair. It's like transparent. So it's an old lady's, like, if you imagine what an older lady's hair typically would look like, the short and like this. But it was transparent. And then I could also see her shoulders I saw up to like right here. But my ex's face was right where her face would be. So I didn't actually see her face. Just the hair and the shoulders. Right. I freaked out again. And I turned the other way. I hit my ex to try to like get him to wake up because I thought maybe if he opens his eyes he'll see her too. But he didn't. He didn't see her. But at least doing that, she went away. So she took off.
We said that this was already during daylight, wasn't it?
Yeah, during daylight already. That was the trippiest part about it, because going off of just what I had learned from the external world about spirits and ghosts and stuff, that they're supposed to not be visible during daylight. They only show themselves in the nighttime. That's what I had heard. But I was like, well, I guess not.
That's a crazy one. Have you had any other ones?
No. Well, so after that experience, I shared it with people because I was like, this happened to me. Oh my goodness, spirits are real, right? So I started talking about it to my friends. And one of my friends told me, hey, maybe you saw this for a reason. Like maybe you have a gift, or maybe you're able to help them in some way. And so maybe there's a reason for it. So I said, oh gosh, okay, all right. If this is my path, I will accept it. But you gotta help me here. Because this is stuff that I have not been prepared to deal with. Like nobody trained me in this. No one gave me a heads up. So I don't know what I'm doing. And I just know I was terrified from that experience, because we get afraid of anything that we don't understand, right?
Yeah.
So having that experience and not even having anybody tell me stories or things like that, it was like, wow, really took me back. So my friend said maybe it's for a reason. So I kind of fed into it. Okay, maybe it is. And so one night I'm laying in bed and I was praying. I said, okay, God. At the time I was still practicing Catholic and stuff. I said, okay, God, if this is your path for me, then I will embrace it. I will walk it, and let's do it. So, and then I said, but let's make sure I can handle it, yeah?
Good point.
Yeah. So, so that night, after I said that, I'm laying in bed, right? And I lived in an apartment with roommates. So I had a roommate at the time. I'm laying in my bed, she's in her bed. And from my bed, I can see there's a mirror, like in the hallway here, that I can see. And in that mirror, I can see our door. So, I can see the access point. So I'm sitting there in bed. And I look in the mirror, and I just, all of a sudden, see the door slowly creep closed. My heart starts pumping. I'm like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. It's real. It's happening again. and my mind went, no, God, I'm not ready. So after that, I messaged my roommates and I was like, hey, please tell me that one of you just came into our room to do something and close the door. And luckily, one of my roommates said, yeah, it was me. I came in and whatever. So from that moment, though, I realized whether I have the gift or not, I don't want it. I personally can't handle seeing them. I can feel them, like I'm okay with to feel them or to just know they're there. But to see it makes it concrete evidence. Like it's real, it's here, right there in front of you. You can't deny it, can't make it up. And I think that it's just too much for me personally. Like there are amazing people who can handle that, and that's their life, that's their gifts, that's what they're doing. For me personally though, I can't. I prefer the energy work. Like let me just feel, let me just get into it. But if I can see it, it's no thanks, I'm good.
Yeah, it is just so out of the ordinary, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because we're so used to things being material and all the science and all that, but then you have these kinds of experience that shows you like, okay, there might be something more going on over here. Like I say, just so out of the ordinary.
Yeah, definitely. And we always hear others tell these stories, but we don't actually believe it really until we see it for ourselves or we experience it for ourselves, because then it's right in our face. We can't say, they were probably half asleep and imagined that they saw something, or, but
Yeah.
it's definitely a
Most
crazy.
people are like that.
Yeah. Yeah, they just brush it off like it's nothing.
Yeah, but then that's the thing. Like, I started getting into a habit of asking people, like, have you ever experienced something that's really out of the ordinary? You know, something you can't explain, like anything. You know, and most of the time people tell you something. That's the interesting part. You know, according to science, they would all just brush it off. Oh, it's just nonsense. It's made up stuff, and you know. But how do you explain all these experiences? I mean, this stuff has been around since forever. You know, since the start of the civilization or before, and so many experience things that are just so out of the ordinary. Whether it's seeing like a diseased one, something like that, or aliens, you know, alien abductions, that kind of stuff. It's hard to just say it's all nonsense.
Oh,
You know?
yeah. I mean, here's the thing, okay?
Go on.
Like I mentioned earlier, we're always afraid of what we don't understand. And if we, for us as a whole, like the whole human civilization, to come to this place where we do have that truth that yes, spirits are real, then what? What do? We don't know anything about them. People are going to freak out. People are going to go insane. You know, but if you keep the veil over, then it keeps our mental peace, kind of, because then we don't have to admit that it is real. And
yeah, it keeps the status quo where it is.
Yeah. And with science, you know, the thing about science is it's amazing, but it's not it, right? You have to remember with science, even science is not perfect. Even science, the conclusions, the laws, all these things, they didn't exist until they existed, right? So there was a point in time where they had no idea how things worked like we do today. So where we are today, we're in the future, we're going to have so much more knowledge that today we may just dismiss things or say that something isn't real just because we don't have the tools to be able to measure it. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist just because we can't prove it or show, you know, because at one point we couldn't prove that gravity was real either. We don't fly off the earth though, do we?
Yeah, that's true.
There's something here.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point. And science is obviously it only shows what we can prove, you know, obviously empirically, and it's the best we know so far.
Right.
It doesn't mean that there's not more to learn. Obviously, when you think about it, like, we still know very, very little about what dark matter is. Even though the normal matter, which is everything that we study so far, is like 4% of the mass of the universe. Then you get dark matter, which is 25%, and the rest of it is dark energy, and we know absolutely nothing about it.
Yeah.
You know, so to say that we know everything, that's so not true.
It's like saying that right now, today, we have explored and we know everything there is to know about the entire ocean. And that's just our ocean. That's here. That's on our planet. You know, like that's something that we can actually go out and experiment and just discover these new things with. We can't just go out into outer space as easily. to really explore things. Or we can look through telescopes, but even that, it's up to our eyes, right? It's up to our perception. And it's a tool. We have to use a tool to measure something. Well, what if that tool is not it? What if it's faulty? What if it's measuring the wrong thing?
Exactly. There's so much to be discovered. And the main thing is, like you were saying, if we prove that ghosts are real, for example, it could be something else as well. Something that science was saying that it's just pure nonsense. If we figure out that that's true, then that opens up a lot of other questions. And I think the main question is really what reality actually is, and how the universe actually works. Because that was one of the biggest shifts really in my thinking about how the universe works. Because if you try to fit all these paranormal phenomena into a materialistic reductionist worldview, which says that you got the universe, which is just a creation of coincidence, and at some point during the evolution, some matter becomes conscious, and you are like a localized consciousness within a bigger universe. Well, if you take that kind of approach and trying to figure out whether there's some kind of a survival of consciousness after death, well, obviously the materialists, they say there's nothing like that. It's just like switching off a computer when you die. So they don't really have a room for that, apart from scientists who are actually a bit more open-minded. And like I said, things like you were talking about, like what you saw, like there's no space for it, right? Now, there are some scientists who are saying that it might be actually the other way around, that all the universe, this reality that we are right now experiencing consciously, all that exists within consciousness, not the other way around. Now, if you go on.
Oh no, I was just going to mention that the proof, like the physical proof of that, is that we don't see with our eyes. We see with our brain. So when our eyes take in the light, just in case anyone listening doesn't know this, because it blew my mind, so. But our eyes take in the light, but it's our brain that actually processes it and reflects that picture back for us to see what we see in front of us. So what we see in front of us is not so like
solid and real.
Material. Like it's not matter and solid like we think it is. Like even science, if you look at atoms are not still. They're constantly vibrating against each other. So what makes up anything is a ton of these little tiny balls vibrating against each other. And because there's this consciousness to these atoms, they know how to react to where they make a water bottle, to where they make a phone. And it's what you expect it to be that determines what it is. I know that part is a little woo, but
yeah, it's well, not entirely. It's our brain projects at least as much into the outside world as much as it perceives. That's true. And also the way it constructs reality based on our perceptions is literally the same process as what's happening when we are having a dream. It's literally the same parts that are at work. And I've experienced when I had some of my lucid dreams. For those who don't know, it's a dream where you wake up during the dream. Well, you don't wake up, you just realize within the dream that you are dreaming. And when I had that, I looked around in that dream, and like either on soil on someone's face, and I realized that this is exactly just as real as this reality that we are experiencing right now. That's pretty great. That really got me thinking about how real is actually this reality.
Yeah. Well, even the CIA has made a statement that we do
I
live
actually
in a
thought about it
holographic.
recently. Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah, that we live in a holographic universe. So the CIA, okay, our government has actually confirmed that we do live in a holographic universe, meaning just like a video game, you know, where you're looking at the screen and everything is inside that video game, but it looks real. You know, like you can put on VR and you feel like you're there. You can go up to stuff, you can, you know, move around everything, but you're not. But your brain thinks you are. That's why people run into stuff. People break things when they have the glasses on, right? Because they think they're really there. That's where we live now. That's our reality. And the crazy thing about it is that we create it based off what we think, feel, and do. So, what you think, you feel, and then you act based on how you feel. So those three go together. And then when you go out into the world, what you see is actually determined by your past experiences, by what you're thinking, feeling, and doing. And to kind of like put it into perspective to show you that if you have two people, one is two people are there at a concert, okay? The first person is at the rail. They're right up front stage. They're at the front. The other person is in the back. Okay? Same concert. They're seeing the same thing. But if you ask them at the end of the night to share their experience, to just tell you what their experience was, they have different experiences because they were at different perspectives. So they were watching the concert at a different perspective. So those things happen, but it's in our minds. And those perspectives are based off of past experiences. Because if you go through something and someone lies to you, someone wrongs you, whatever, then the next time that you're in a situation where you have to trust somebody, you're going to be hesitant. You're going to be less open to just giving them your full trust because someone else has already done something that put that to you where you don't trust us fully. And that's perspective. That's your perspective. Somebody else who doesn't have that experience of being lied to or anything, they can trust openly because they don't have that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And here's something related to this, and also, you know, when we are talking about science, this is just to demonstrate like the limits of our current science. First of all, I can't prove that you are conscious. Neither can you prove that I'm conscious. There's no way how to figure it out, even though there's some recognition that, you know, there's someone in there. Right. Same as when you look at your cat, you know, there's someone in there. There's like a observer, something that experiences everything. And the other thing is, we can't prove that there's something outside of consciousness, because everything that we ever study, everything that we ever perceive, it's all within consciousness. And we have all our tools, or the James Webb Telescope, we all just perceive it for our consciousness, and we can't really prove that there's something outside of it.
Right.
And here's one more thing. When you mention video games, this is a real mindfuck. Mm-hmm. Lamps in video games, they use real electricity. Something to think about.
What? What? Are you you serious?
Well, yeah, technically they are. Right.
They are. Wow.
I know, right? When I heard that, I was like, damn.
Wow,
Anyway.
that's crazy. Yeah, but so saying how you can't prove consciousness because we are consciousness, so it's hard to, like, you can't separate us from it, right? And that's the problem, because if we need to define something, we have to be able to separate it to, that's science. Like, you have to be able to
Analyze it and quantify it somehow.
right. And
Which,
so
how
you
do you
have
quantify someone's consciousness? You can't.
yeah, you
You can
can.
define it, but that's about it.
And it's like the double slit experiment. Have you heard of that?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. So it's like that. It's like the same thing where if you're looking at something because you're observing it, the atoms respond differently. So as long as you're looking, they're going to respond in a certain way, but you can't study it if you don't look at it. So it creates this thing of just like, how do we do this? And that's why I say science just isn't there yet. We still have so much farther to go as far as learning, discovering the world around us.
Yeah, definitely. And this double slit experiment, they also opens up a lot of, basically like a can of worms, really. Because there's, for our listeners, you can have a look at Dr. Dean Radin. He did some really good research in this field, in terms of like the paranormal, magic, all these things. And there were some really good experiments, like different versions of the double slit experiment. For example, where because basically what happens there, when someone's looking, basically you're shooting an electron or a photon through two slits, and then you got a wall which it hits at the end, and then depending on whether someone's measuring it, someone's observing it, if someone's observing it, basically the particle, wave particle duality, the particle collapsing into a particle. But if no one's watching, it basically goes through both slits at the same time and it creates an interference pattern. So it's basically a wave. Now, that was a big debate and still is. Like, what's happening there? Is it really the consciousness of a person that makes the wave collapse into a particle, or is it something else? Is it something to do with the measurement device? But here's the thing: there was a version of this where this was running for quite a while, and they didn't observe it entirely, with an instrument. They just told people to think about it, right? So, and turns out, this was a statistically significant finding, that even people from the other side of the planet, when they were focusing on the experiment going on, they managed to collapse the wavelength into a particle just by thinking. And there were also a different version of this experiment. For example, involved them. I'm not sure how exactly it was. Basically, you would split up the electron first, and then it will hit one of the two particles that were basically what's it called? Entangled. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. So one of them would hit the wall first, and I'm not sure how the measuring device, but basically the result was that the future measurement of all of the entangled particles made the other particle collapse in the past. So the one that collapsed, the first one that hit, there was no measuring device. But because we measured the other one, obviously then you know also the other one in which state it is. It's because of the entanglement. So that also opens up a big can of worms and lots of questions there. Does that mean that the future can influence the past or at least the present? Because there's also even Jacques Vallée, super intelligent guy. He was talking about retrocausality, where something in the future can actually influence the present. Because even in physics, there's nothing showing the air of time, apart from the law of thermodynamics, which is basically just statistics. So technically, we don't have anything showing the arrow of time in physics. And just like even Einstein was saying that there is no past, present, or future. It all existed all at once. So
yeah, there's a really nice metaphor that Alan Watts used to describe time. And he says that when you look at the past, you're looking at it now. When you look at the future, you're looking at it now. When it was the past, it was now. When the future comes, it will be now. So life itself is kind of like this, okay? If you imagine you have a wooden fence in front of you, and there's a small hole that you can look through. So you look through the fence, and you start to see a snake. Okay, so first you see the head, then you see the body, eventually you see the tail. Well, could you say you only looked at it for 1 second and you saw the stomach, the middle of the snake. You didn't see the head and you didn't see the tail, but you would still say that you saw the snake because you saw it in that moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just because you didn't see the head or the tail doesn't mean it's not a snake. You're only seeing it, though, from this perspective. And that's life. Life is like a really long, infinite snake. And we're looking at it right now through the hole in the fence for our tiny little fraction that we get to experience in our lives in this lifetime. And divided further, each moment is like looking through that hole. It's all a part of the past. It's all a part of the future. But in reality, all it is right now.
Yeah. It's all we ever have, just the present moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that aspect of just thinking, like, even when you think about an old memory, this is why our minds are so powerful, because even when we look at something, a memory, say that maybe wasn't the best time for us, it wasn't the best experience for us, when we pull out that memory bank and start thinking about it again and going through it again, we experience all the same emotions that we experienced when it actually happened. There's no difference between when it happened in the past versus when you're thinking about it happening right now. Your body reacting the same way.
Yeah.
Okay? So
it's kind of like also when you're watching a movie.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why you're so thrilled or whatever emotion it brings up is because you experience it as it was happening to you in real life.
Yeah. Yeah. And so with that, it's like that memory that you're thinking of, it doesn't exist except in your head.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a remote in your hand where you can decide, I want to go back and relive this experience, and you can actually take yourself and go back to that point in time. You can't do that. You're right here. You will only ever be right here. Right now, where you are. You can't go back. You can't go forward. This is it.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And all this stuff that go on.
I was just gonna say, it puts a lot of things into perspective, because we tend to think time is linear, and that the past, present, future, and we separate them, right? They're different. They're distinct. They don't have to be. It's a mental construct that isn't really helping us.
Well, that's first thing that I'm going to say is all this stuff that we were talking about quantum physics and what you were just saying. It all shows that nature is super counterintuitive. The way the universe works on big scales, and even more on the subatomic level, it's totally counterintuitive.
Mm-hmm.
Things can exist at 2 points at the same time, or on the quantum level, and it's just fucking crazy. It's not what we're experiencing right now, for example.
Yeah.
That's one thing. And what was the other thing I would say? I don't know. Might come back to my mind.
It will come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Oh, yeah. Now I know.
Came back. Cool.
Yeah, the way we perceive time and how we experience this reality, it seems to be really just our brains constructing this reality in a certain way just for us to survive, just for our survival. Everything that we perceive is the minimum we need to survive. And this is really interesting, that what Donald Hoffman talks about, because he's one of the people who, well, he obviously studied perception, which is way more complicated than most people think. Mm-hmm. And he's also saying that he's basically trying to come up with a falsifiable theory, or hypothesis at least, of the universe existing within consciousness. He's trying to figure out whether it's plausible or not, which is a pretty good approach, really. And he was saying, for example, if you take evolution, he didn't explain it because theory of evolution, it's a mathematically precise theory, so you can simulate it and whatever else you can do with it. And so he had to look better species that can perceive the truth, reality as it is, whether they would have an advantage compared to a species which can only perceive what helps them to survive. Basically fitness, points. Yeah. Let's put it that way. Turns out every species that was capable of perceiving the truth entirely would die out. Those who only perceive what they need to survive. Mm-hmm. For example, he mentioned this beetle in, I think it was in Australia. They had to ban throwing out glasses and bottles that were dark, because those beetles, for them, it looked like a female of their species, and so they wouldn't go after the females of their species. They would go after the bottles, and almost died out.
No.
And so this is, they didn't perceive truth as the reality of things as it is. They only perceive what would help them survive and reproduce, right?
Right.
And it seems like that even in case of humans, even though we think that we perceive reality as it is, you think that what you see is actually there, and it is in reality the way you perceive it. But it seems like that's not really the case. In fact, we have no idea what reality actually looks like and what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
The things we are talking about, that the past, present, future, everything existing at once, and the universe being basically like a hologram.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to even imagine. I mean, I have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah, well, because to perceive it completely unbiasedly, right? To perceive the universe for what it is would mean we have to be completely unbiased with it. There's not a single person alive who's going to be able to look at things that way, because we all have experiences, and every experience creates some type of neurological pathway in your body.
Yeah. At least within this state of consciousness, we can definitely say that we are not perceiving truth and reality as it is.
Yeah.
Now, the question is that if you change your state of consciousness through whatever means, whether taking a psychedelic, having a random mystical experience, or God knows what else, can you then perceive a bigger reality, or get at least a bit closer to what the reality actually is? And that's a question.
That's a good question.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I mean, so this is just my opinion, but I think based off of what I've kind of learned and accumulated over the years, I think really that we're limited for what we can understand, because some stuff is too much for us to understand. Like, take aliens, for example. For some people, if the government was to come out and say, yes, aliens are real, some people would go insane, like literally mentally insane, because they wouldn't be able to cope with the idea of just knowing that there's actually aliens and they're alive, they're real. So we have to kind of put this filter, this veil over us, so that we don't get traumatized, so that we don't go insane and just, we have to, it's kind of like, the more you learn, the more intelligent you become. Actually, the more...
Well, not always.
No. I'm saying like both of those. So just the more you learn, or the more intelligent you become, or just the more you go and ask questions and try to discover stuff about the universe, specifically about these things that are very hard to grasp and hard to understand. They're things that you kind of have to, you learn it, and then you're like, okay, let me take a step back, take a breath, give me some time to fully accept that that's true, then we can keep going forward. If you bombard yourself with too much at once, it'll overwhelm you, and you will mentally just lose it, because you don't have that grip on, you don't have that, you're not grounded. And that's a
Yeah, that's
big
true.
thing, is that sometimes people go too far into that stuff that they get ungrounded, and then it takes you. You have to remain here, your consciousness. You have to keep it level-headed while we go into learning these things. But I think that that's why why we're not born already knowing all these things right now. And that's not to say that we can't progress, but I think that we have to do it, consciously, where we're aware of like, all right, how far are we going? Because a lot of people can't handle the truth. So
Yeah.
that's why
Well,
they don't know it.
there's not much in our society that would prepare us for whatever is out there. That's the thing. I mean, exactly what you were saying, that really is the case with the use of psychedelics in the West.
Yeah.
Because these experiences that can be like pretty freaking crazy, and it can show you. It's even something what Jordan Peterson said. He was like, I have no idea what psychedelics are, but one thing we can for sure say, they bend the structure of reality. Now, that's really powerful. And if you say that basically science is, most of scientists, not all of them obviously, they're saying that what we perceive on a psychedelic trip is just hallucinations, something just what your brain makes up. But then the people who actually have these experiences, they report, well, first of all, some of them are very similar, which is very interesting. Some of them are very life-changing, depending on the dose and everything. And they seem to show a bigger reality that underlies this one. They obviously, because like you were saying, whatever we perceive, it's always, there's some kind of a bias there. We perceive it for a filter of our past experiences and our memory and all our conditioning, all of it. But as we know, psychedelics can turn off certain parts of the brain, so there's no ego involved. And on a podcast with my friend Earl, it was episode might have been episode 10, not sure. Anyway, like I was talking about my own experiences when I also experienced something that was, well, first of all, you can't really, no amount of words that can really explain what you experience over there. And I did experience something that was just infinite and eternal. There was no time and there was no separation between me and this thing. I just became one with it. And that really begs the question, like, about what exactly consciousness is and what reality is. Once again, it's like we perceive ourselves as separate beings. I'm separate from you, I'm separate from this table, and I'm localized within the universe. Even as we know, the universe is non-local, actually. And so what underlies this universe? Is it really something that has always been here, always will be, something that's eternal and possibly conscious? Because that's what people experience on these experiences, not necessarily just psychedelics, but you can get it from breathwork, you can get it from meditation and running hundreds of miles or something stupid like that. So this is another thing that science really has to look into, like what's going on there, instead of just saying it's all nonsense.
Right. Yeah.
And like if someone has psychedelics here in the West, there's nothing really to prepare them. So like you say, it's super overwhelming, and it can be damaging in some ways, but because it's just not done properly.
Right. Yeah, and there's in one of Alan Watts's lectures, he explained it very well. What psychedelics does is it takes us to this place where all those things, all that conditioning, all the ego telling us that we have to do this, we have to be like this, society telling us this is the way things are. Psychedelics dissolves all of that, and it brings us into our true nature as spiritual beings, not human beings, spiritual beings. And it connects us in a way that we don't get to experience today without them, or without breath work, or without, without that intentional trying to get there. The average person doesn't experience it.
I think there are some glimpses of it, and it's something that every person strives to experience. But usually, people reach for the wrong things to experience something like that.
Right. We reach for the things that society tells us will fill that void.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not the real deal.
No, definitely not. Because if society told you the real deal, we'd have a collapse in everything and actually be living in harmony
Much better
together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But the way that Alan Watts described it, he said, if you want to describe black, you have to describe white, because you can't describe one without the other to compare it to, right? So in order to define myself, I can only define myself based off of the other. You see, because I can only say I'm smart if someone else is not as smart.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. That's just the thought, the example that came to my head. But, you know, I can only say I'm short because others are tall. If there was no one else that was tall, I wouldn't understand the meaning of short, right? So even when we are in our vessel and I'm sitting on this side of the continent, you're on that side of the continent.
I'm on a different continent, Paul.
Yeah, right, different continent, thank you. But I still can only define myself based off of you. Without you, I'm undefinable. I just exist. I don't have any understanding of who I am or what I am, because there's nothing else for me to compare it to, right? So to separate is impossible. Like, literally impossible. Because the minute you separate, you take away the line. You take away the definition of who you are, of what you are. You need that other just to be able to know you.
Yeah. That seems to be the nature of our universe. Yin-yang, isn't it?
Always. And if you really start to notice, you see it. Like, when the Amazon rainforest was doing really, really bad a few years ago, and, you know, it was not looking good. It was not looking like it was going to be stopped anytime soon. And after not having rain for, I don't remember how long at this point, but months, maybe even up to a year. After not having rain for that long, it rained. Nature said, okay, humans, you fucked up. I gotta come clean up your mess, because you can't clean it up yourself. And rained. And that's nature. Like, that's the consciousness of nature, right? Because we know we have a consciousness, but we don't tend to think that nature also has a consciousness, but it does. And if you don't believe that, spend some time with a plant. Give it some water and actually feel the leaves. the leaves actually fill up with the water. And that's how you can tell when a plant needs water, is you feel the leaves. If the leaves feel flimsy, you'll know that it needs water. They feel pretty thick, then it's hydrated. But that's the plant's consciousness. Like, a plant, there's so much more than we give them credit for.
Yeah, that's true. And again, this is one of the things that science has done a big disservice over here in the West to us. Because all the previous civilizations, they, like you said, they knew there's some kind of consciousness in nature. It's not just something you can do whatever the hell you want with it. Something you can, just dig up to, for your own profit. It's something that needs to be protected. Something that has consciousness and life in it. Something sacred. And the science telling us, and the Western mindset is just nah. That's why we end up with destroying the rainforest and everything.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna share this one because this one blew my mind, and I'm gonna blow all your listeners' minds too. Okay, so
Okay, go for it.
water. Okay, you take a drop of water, put it under a microscope, and look at it. What you see is a crystalline structure. Okay.
You mean ice?
Yeah. No, water. Or maybe they freeze it. Maybe they freeze it.
I think what you mean is when they freeze it, yeah.
Yeah. So
normal water doesn't have crystals when it's liquid.
Oh, okay. So they freeze it and then put it under the microscope, and then it shows the crystal structure of the water. So there has been an experiment repeated over and over and over again, and the results are always the same. And this is the experiment, okay? They take a group of people, and they put a cup of water in the middle. People around the water cup, okay? And they tell them, say horrible things to the water. Okay? Just talk bad, say I hate you, you're ugly, whatever. Okay? Bad things to the water. Freeze it. Put it under a microscope. Compared to the first crystal structure that had nothing talked to it, spoken onto it, whatever. The crystalline structure was so much more rugged, jagged edges. It just didn't look good. Okay, you can tell that it was more distorted than the one that had no words spoken to it at all. Same group, okay, different cup of water. Now he says, okay, speak nothing but good things to this water. I love you. I'm proud of you. You're amazing. Okay. Froze the water. Put it under a microscope. Perfect crystalline structures. Beautiful. Okay, they were actually like symmetrical. They were actually completed. That is the power of energy, of words, of your conscious intention, and what you intend to do to something as simple as water. Because guess what? You go and you're holding a cup of water in your hand, and you're pissed off, you're angry, you're cussing up a storm, you're telling someone off, and then you drink your water. You just made your water less nourishing for you just because of the environment that you put it in. Works on the flip side too. You have a cup of water in front of you. You can amplify what that water does for you when you drink it. by speaking good things into it. And then when you drink it, you're taking in not just the water, but the energy that you also helped to amplify that water with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard about it. And when you think about it, we are also mostly made of water.
Yes, we are.
So every freaking thought, every emotion that we have, it's gonna affect us in a way.
Mm-hmm. Everything. Even in the Bible, there's I'm gonna butcher this because I don't know it word for word, but I know there's a phrase where God says, watch your tongue, because what you speak, you will hex somebody, you will curse somebody with your words. And it works the opposite way. You can bless somebody with your words too. But that's the energy we carry. That's the power of consciousness. Like, we have that ability and we don't know it. We're not taught it, because once we know and we know that we can do this, like, the game changes. You're sick. Guess what happens when you know how to heal yourself? You don't need to go to a doctor. You don't need to get medication. That whole industry collapses because it relies on you not knowing your power to profit and stay alive.
Yeah. Even though the studies are there, I mean, we're talking about basically the placebo effect, right?
Oh yeah,
and
science loves to write that off.
Yeah, well, there's plenty of studies that show that this stuff works, and you can easily find so many stories where people heal themselves from almost like stage 4 cancer when they were almost on deathbed, and they still have like a spontaneous remission. But as we know, it's not spontaneous whatsoever.
Yeah, and it's crazy because we all know the placebo effect exists. Well, the placebo effect in itself is proof that our minds, our consciousness, is having an effect on our physical reality, that the world that we perceive around us. And that's why science is now starting to come around to the idea more that the world is more energy than it is matter. Even though we perceive it as being more matter and solid, it's actually more fluid and flowy.
Yeah, well, that's what Albert Einstein taught us with theory of relativity. E equals mc squared. So energy can be turned into matter, and matter can be transformed into energy. And it's basically the same thing, really, both of them.
Yeah. It's insane. I just can't believe that we're not taught about it, because when you learn it, and not just learn it, okay, because like hearing us talk about it, right? People are probably interested and they're like, wow, this is insane. I never knew this stuff. But when you experience it yourself, when you have moments where you just realize, like, wow, I made this happen. I made this happen because of the way that I was thinking, or because I did this thing that opened the door for this to even come into my life, or whatever it may be. When you have that moment where you're like, oh shit, where those thoughts become like real, now it's in front of you and you know that it's real, that changes everything.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about a slightly different understanding. Because, again, over here in normal society, we go to school, for example, and they tell us things about history, mathematics, all those things. But it's all just information that doesn't go that deep, really. we understand it intellectually, but for any information to have like a really deep impact on us, we have to understand it on a deeper level, not just the intellectual. And that's something that you experience on psychedelics or other states of consciousness. You get some info there, but it's not like, oh, okay, I need to do this now, I guess. Well, it's like, oh my god, this is why I need to do it. This is super fucking important, you know. It's like you feel it with your entire being.
Yeah.
That's and that's the thing. Like, you can find all these things because I come from basically an atheistic background. Where I come from, the communism did its job. So the two generations before me, because of communism, and even the one before, that's when it started. They were atheists because of communism, because in a communist country you can't go to church,
Mm-hmm.
and so my parents, grandparents, they were basically atheists. And my dad, he was into UFOs, and he would always, when he didn't know what to buy me, like what kind of a gift, especially in my later teenage years, early 20s, he would always get me like an Erich von Däniken book, this ancient alien theory stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So he was into that. So when I was growing up, no one told me you have to believe in God, or not even the other way around. They were skeptical of it in terms of there being some kind of a higher power, especially the more simplistic version of Christianity, for example. Like, there's a man in the sky watching you all the time. Like, my parents were like, oh, that's just nonsense. So basically I grew up in this kind of environment. So, and one thing led to another. I started with martial arts, and they got me into philosophy, thanks to Bruce Lee. And so I came to all this stuff with a pretty open mind. I never believed in like a God in the sky or something like that. But I started studying things. A bit of Buddhism, Taoism, Krishnamurti is still one of my favorite philosophers. And you start to see some patterns there. It's like all these things that the previous civilizations or the philosophers were saying. It's basically this many times it's same core message, just
Mm-hmm.
explained differently because it was different times, different culture.
Yeah.
But once you figure out what's underneath it, and even better if you have a personal experience of it, not just like thinking, oh, I'm so connected to God and Jesus or whoever I particularly like, Shiva or who else. If you actually have the experience, because you can, and that's a very different thing, really. And like I say, you start to see patterns there. That's there must be something more to it.
Yeah, and this I learned from watching like a health conference summit. We live in a world that, let's just say, is not very truthful with us, right? So because of that, we have to be very cautious of what we are believing, what we're just going along with. It's really important to question what you're told, to just question it, not doubt it, not whatever, but just question it. Be curious, be open-minded, because not everybody has your best interest at heart, has our best interest at heart. And especially with science, I'm not going to go into all of it, but with science, the way that you can decipher what's true, what's real, is find the patterns, because the pattern is usually the truth, or at least it's more along the lines of what the truth actually is. And so with that, yeah, there's so many patterns, and that's really what started to pull me to be like, wow, I think there really is some truth to all of this, because there's so many people from different time periods who didn't know each other saying very similar stuff that you wouldn't have if there wasn't some legitimacy behind it.
Yeah, that's true. And it reminded me. I think on the podcast we did with Alison, or did the one with Alison, just her, I mentioned this contest that Robert Bigelow did. So basically, he asked people who are experts in their fields to submit essays about the afterlife, whether there's some kind of survival of consciousness after death, physical death. And the winner would get like $1 million or something. And I've heard recently, because coincidentally, I found this podcast. It's called New Thinking Aloud with Dr. Robert Michelot. Not sure if is his name Robert Michelot, surname. So I came across him, and turns out he won the contest. Right? And I've heard him mention it, and he said the main piece of evidence is all the evidence combined. So like, seeing the pattern there, that there's probably something going on there.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest best argument for some kind of a survival of consciousness after physical death. Whether it's even like the seance that I told you about that I had, where I got some info that was like really freaking spot on. And this person just had no freaking way of figuring that stuff out, And it wasn't just me, it's all the people that were in the seance involved, near-death experiences. Why they're so freaking similar despite all the cultural differences between people. Obviously, some people say they will see Krishna, some people will see Jesus, but at the end of the day, it's still a very similar experience.
Right.
So,
and that begs the question of, what is the afterlife? Is it actually something that's like, is it something that has already this structure of how it is and the way it works and all of that? Or is it dependent on our own personal and individual beliefs that determine what the afterlife will be for us?
that's a good question. Because especially here in the West, people tend to think about being almost like a physical place, kind of like this. You're kind of yourself there, and time flows, even though it's it's in eternity over there. But or some people say it's there, like you can get to it physically almost. But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But like you say, it might just be a different state of consciousness, which is again, like if consciousness, if the universe exists within consciousness, then saying like where is the afterlife or where do we go, it doesn't make sense to ask that kind of question. Because if we are constructing reality, which we know we do basically, then that's once again it's a bit more counterintuitive than we thought it would be.
And everything gets tangled because we can't separate ourselves and our consciousness. We can't take out that bias.
Yeah. And in for example, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Bardo Todol, that's they always kind of like stood out to me. And the way they explain what happens after you die, you go through the different bardos, which technically even our state of consciousness right now, this stage of the cycle, it's also one type of bardo, but after you die and before you get reincarnated, according to their beliefs, you go through 4 different stages, 4 different bardos, and again, it always stood out to me how precise, all these things. It's like, basically what this book is about. It's like a guide, how to guide someone who passed away and how to help them out to, in the afterlife. Because according to them, people who die, they can hear, but you can't hear them. Mm-hmm. So this is a way, like a guide, how to help them out. And the way they explain it, it's not like you go to a physical place. It's more like I said, it looks more like a different state of consciousness. Mm-hmm. And the things you see there, they might seem real to you, but the book warns you that it's just projections of your own mind, and that's what you need to recognize there. Yeah. That's why you need to cultivate awareness during your lifetime, because that's going to transfer even into your other states of consciousness, like dreaming, meditation, and also in the afterlife. Mm-hmm. What happened in the 4 different bardos afterwards. So you have to be aware, recognize the things for what they actually are, that they're not actual things. Because you can see horrible things or you can see beautiful things. Depends on what kind of life you had, what kind of experiences you had. Mm-hmm. But you need to recognize that it doesn't really matter. And if you do so, then there's always the possibility of going back to the source of everything and becoming one with it, rather than going back into this life or some kind of other life and just repeating the cycle all over again. Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting book, and who knows, maybe it's true, maybe not, but definitely something to think about.
Yeah, definitely. It's very interesting. I mean, none of us are actually going to know until we go, right? So yeah, we can just kind of piece things together based off of what multiple people are saying, but until we go, we won't really know. But I know that I've heard like a lot of just more so on that side of the afterlife is actually based off of our beliefs when we're alive. So if we believe that we're going to go to heaven and it's going to be this beautiful place and all of this, then I think it's more likely that that's going to happen for us. But for people who maybe don't believe in an afterlife or believe in anything, then I don't think that I don't know. I think they might be stuck. But they themselves, even in the afterlife, will not be able to perceive that they are in the afterlife. Because consciously in this lifetime, they didn't have a belief in there being one. So I think that gets carried with us throughout our lives.
Yeah, you brought up a good point. Yeah, you brought up a good point, because whenever you hear someone talking about the afterlife, especially here in the West, they always kind of assume that you're gonna know you're dead. Mm-hmm. But is that really the case? Doesn't have to be. I don't think so. Like I read this book, and they mentioned one thing over there. You dream every night, multiple times, every night throughout your life. And how many times do you realize that you're dreaming? Mm. Some people never do so. Mm-hmm. So how can you expect to know that you're dead when you experience that only once in your lifetime?
Mm-hmm. That's good. Yeah, it's
very good. Again, we need to really be aware of our biases and our beliefs, because on this podcast, for example, what we're trying to figure out is the truth. Have conversations, and whatever conclusion we come to doesn't matter to me, really, as long as it's it gets us a bit closer to the truth, or it makes our lives a bit better. right?
Mhm.
Because many times you hear people say, but my special holy book says this, not this. And it's like, for me personally, like I said, I don't, I don't really care what the answer is to all these questions. If I find out that there's nothing afterwards, well, I guess I'm going to enjoy this life a bit more. If not, I'm still going to enjoy it, and make the best out of it. But at the end of the day, for me, it doesn't really matter. I just want to find out what's going on.
Yeah.
And that was probably really the biggest question that I always had. It's like, what is all this about? Why am I here?
Mhm.
And all that question just started everything for me, really. It's a good question to ask, and like I say, you need to be aware of your own biases, and just come
Mhm.
to these things and have conversations and listen to people with different opinions with an open mind.
Yeah.
And not that many people can do it these days.
Definitely not. Definitely not. I know all of you listening though, you guys can. You're here. You're with
Because
us.
you rock.
Yes.
Yep.
You're all amazing. Yeah, I mean it's definitely, it is, so many people are more closed-minded to this stuff. They're very quick to deny it, to dismiss it, to hold firm on their own beliefs, even if you present evidence that contradicts that belief. So we live in this world that kind of feeds us and tells us what to believe. And then because of the fact that we think it's our belief, we hold firm onto it, even though it wasn't our belief to begin with. Like, it's
Yep.
a belief that we adapted from somebody else. But it's only when you do start asking those questions and do open your mind and get curious that you actually find the truth. Because as long as you hold on to your belief and you're not asking questions and you're just, all right, I'm here, this is what I believe, I'm good, there's no growth in that.
Mm-hmm.
And you're relying on a system that, let's just say, is not the best to tell you how to live your life and telling you how to believe for your life. And maybe it will work for you and be in your best benefit, but maybe it won't. And if you never question anything, you never open yourself up to that possibility that, hey, maybe this isn't working for me, or maybe there isn't, as much truth to this that I've been told, but maybe there's a little more truth this way or over this side. Unless you have that, you'll never open that door to actually walk through it and discover the real truth for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we live in very interesting times, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting times. But I will say that blindly following somebody else will more likely than not, in today's world, take you places that you never intended to be. And if you want to go somewhere where you actually want to be at and live a life that you really actually want to be living, then you have to ask questions. You have to be curious. You have to question what's being told to you. And as long as you do, the truth will present itself. It may not be what you want to hear, and it may not always be pretty, but you'll find the truth. Seek and ye shall find.
That's very true.
Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate that we live in a world where we have to do that, but where we have to search for that truth. But, you know, we have it in us. We already know a lot of the truth anyways. We feel it. We deep down, we know that the way this world is right now, the way things are, is not it. You know, deep down, we know that there's more to consciousness and that we are more powerful beings than the lives that we're living right now. We know that.
Yeah, the problem is that we are not in touch with those parts of us that tell us those things. It's quite unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because even if you study Buddhism or whatever, you know, they usually say to you that all the answers are already within you. And it's true. It's just how do you get to them?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Your intuition, like, so me, even as a healer, right? When I practice Reiki on somebody, I don't have these magic powers that let me heal while others can't. No. We are all healers. We all have the ability to heal ourselves and heal others. The difference is I have learned how to cultivate it. You know, I've learned how to really amplify that gift that we all have and use it with my intention behind it. Anyone can do it too, just like we can all heal ourselves. But again, we have to seek that truth. We have to look for it, and then we find it. And the amount of healing experiences that I've been able to see through this, it's like, wow, you know, I could never imagine my life any differently. And I deeply empathize with everyone in the world because people don't know about this, and there's so much suffering and so many people who go without being helped, without any type of answers. And I empathize with it because we do live in that world that takes away our power, that makes us believe certain things, because then it keeps us in this loop where we're stuck, and you know, we can't actually evolve and become our potential.
Yeah, there's definitely so much potential within each one of us.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I feel it. That's one thing that I pick up on when I interact with others, is their true essence, their true being, like who they are deep down. And man, it's incredible. And that's why I you know, do what I do, trying to help people to get there so that they can live in that full potential. Because when you live in that, whoo, life is like life is just like you're soaring, you know, and things can come by, or someone can take a slingshot and fling a rock at you, fling a boulder at you. But when you're in that potential, in living in that space, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You can take the hit because you're just gonna keep going.
Yeah, that's true. Well, once again, our educational system doesn't tell us anything about it because they just want obedient workers. You know. But fortunately, with the internet, you got people like you, myself, you know, talking about this stuff
Talking
openly.
about the good stuff.
And yeah, exactly. All the good stuff that the schools didn't teach us.
the things we wish school taught us.
Oh God, yeah. Like, oh, school is, even when I was looking forward to something like quantum physics or philosophy at school, I was like, that's gonna be finally something interesting. But they always manage to leave out all the super interesting stuff
The juicy
and explain
stuff.
things in the most boring way possible. I'm like, God damn it.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason. It's because school is meant to turn us into worker bees, not thinking bees.
That's true.
So it gives us enough to make us feel like we're learning all the good stuff. But it leaves out the most important things that somebody could really make discoveries if they knew all the information.
Right. Let's leave something for another episode as well.
Okay.
And obviously, you're gonna be back earlier than in 9 months this time.
Yeah.
But this is the first podcast we did, just the two of us. So I do need to ask you the last few questions. So the first thing, if there was one piece of advice you could give to people, what would it be?
That's a good one. Let me think. Okay. If I could tell everyone listening one piece of advice, I would say hold on, I lost it. I have a lot running through my head, and I picked a good one, and I put it on, like, I took a little note out of it, and then I kept going, and then I lost it. So let me recenter myself.
Keeping us in suspense.
Yeah, have to build it up,
Oh, yeah. That'll be a good one now then.
Yeah, of course, always a good one. It would be that you are your only limit in life. Like, you can be anything. And I say this as someone who never thought much of myself or my life, never really thought highly of what I wanted. And I see now, luckily, I'm very grateful to now have this perspective, but I see now that really we are our only limit, because if we want something and we don't think we can have it, or we don't think we deserve it, or we don't think that we're worthy of having it, that inner feeling puts a block on us ever actually having that thing. So don't limit yourself. Don't. Because if you do, you'll never know how great you could have been if you would have just gone with it.
Beautiful. That was worth the wait.
Glad I could make it worth your while.
Right. Second question. What does femininity mean to you?
Femininity?
Yeah.
To me, femininity means vulnerability, means flowing. It means having compassion and going through life with ease and grace, rather than feeling like we have to have these rough exteriors because the world's gonna hurt us if we're too soft, right? Well, the feminine is that softness, because just like we need hardness, we also need softness. Because in those moments where our emotions get the best of us, or where life really knocks us down, it's that feminine energy that allows us to feel, that allows us to process and flow and to just dance through life rather than feeling like we're fighting it.
Okay, great. And the last question, what do you think is the meaning of life?
Ooh. I think there are a lot of meanings, and I think that it can actually mean whatever meaning we give it. So for me personally, I believe life is an experience. I don't think there's like necessarily an end goal that we're supposed to have achieved by the end of our lives. I think that it's just here for us to experience it. And I look at it in this perspective. When we're spirits, we don't have eyes, right? And if you remember what I mentioned earlier, that our eyes don't see, our eyes are what take in the light that reflects the image in our brains and allows us to see what's in front of us. So as spirits, when we pass and we go into the afterlife, if there is an afterlife, we don't have eyes anymore, right? So we can't see, we can't observe the world anymore. We can feel what's around us and feel what we think is there, but we can't see it anymore. So I believe that this life is for us to see and use our senses, all of our senses, and really experience what it is to be alive, what it means to feel things, even all of the emotions, the good ones and the not so good ones. I think that's the meaning, is for us to experience. And it's very beautiful because we take it for granted. A sunset, the warmth that you feel on your skin. We don't recognize it as much, but it's a miracle for us to be here and experiencing the life that we are.
It really is. Okay, where can people find you?
Ooh, good question. So you can find me on Instagram at you are electric healer. Also at Vegan Savage Fitness. So you can find me there. I also have my Facebook, which is just my name, D'Lena Ochoa. But connect with me any way you guys want to.
Cool. Well, it was really lovely talking to you, as always.
Yeah.
And all the links, you'll be able to find it down in the description below. So thank you very much for tuning in. And like I said earlier, you can find this podcast now on Spotify as well. And yeah, we'll see you soon.
Yeah. Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
Bye, guys.
Okay.
I'm excited. Oh! Wow! Look at you!
What do you think?
Oh my goodness, you look so awesome. You ready?
Go.
My little mouse.
He just froze for a moment.
But, oh, dang.
No, it might be okay.
But the hood doesn't stay, so we're gonna do this.
I miss those fluffy ears. It's been a while.
I know, huh? It's been a while. They're gonna become my signature little look.
Yeah, definitely is. Now I got a lipstick on my freaking cup.
Ah. The struggle.
Yep.